everybody. We are here today with Echo of Fancy Monster Vision. Say hey.
Hi, everybody.
It's been a while since you've been on here. I'm glad to have you back. It's been too long.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I know, but the themes, they keep theming. So,
You do. And you were on, it was about, I can't believe it was almost 3 years ago. That's really crazy to me.
was it? Oh my gosh. It
Yeah.
feels like just yesterday.
I
And
was
yet,
looking, yeah, it was March of 2022. Like the end of,
wow. Yeah, because it's 25. Huh.
yeah, no, and that's
Oh,
weird.
an
So
excellent.
2025?
Yeah. Oh my God. It's an excellent time to revisit, though, because we're about to have the final Chiron return of the United States. And it is shaping up to be a doozy.
Yes, it is. And when you were here before, we talked about Chiron. So
Mm-hmm.
this does feel
Yeah.
like, an appropriate time, an appropriate subject matter. So today we're going to be talking about Chiron and Aries and Chiron's return in the US, um,
Mm-hmm.
all that stuff. But first, I want you to say what you said before about people that say they know everything there is to know about.
Oh.
I feel like this is a good place to start.
Yes, definitely. So I think my enthusiasm can sometimes come out as a sense of authority because I've done so much like research about this particular topic over the last few years. It's been like a main focus for me. But when we have new astrological concepts sort of filter into our consciousness, when we discover a new planet, or in this case, a new comet, we are constantly learning as they are manifesting themselves. We don't immediately apply it to astrology and know everything about it. So, Chiron itself was discovered in 1977 at 2 degrees of Taurus. So, since it's in Aries, we haven't even seen its own first birthday, which means we're a really interesting time because we can, in real time, sort of start to see the flavors of the last little bits right before we were conscious of it. Um, and it's going to start to solidify during its second round around all of the zodiac signs. So, the thing to know about this is it's a very exploratory, curious, um, exciting, even though a lot of the themes can be a little bit of a bummer, um, thing to learn about and explore in real time. And I think it's important to come to these kinds of topics with a sense of humility. There's a lot of astrologers or people who are interested in astrology who say it's just the wounded healer, it's this, it's that, these are the significations. And there's no really way to know that until we have more time with it. So if you hear anybody say, oh, this is what this means, point blank, there's no wriggle room. I would be very cautious about listening to them about this particular topic. There are some fabulous astrologers out there who completely disregard this comet or call it an asteroid, which is a pet peeve of mine. Um, and everybody has their particular focus on what they are most like well researched in. So if you're interested in learning more about it, it's a great time to do that.
It
But
really, it
there's
really,
no authority on it.
yeah, yeah, I know what you mean about people that, and not even just with Chiron, but with all kinds, just like this is what it is, and this is all that it is, and it's I'm like, I don't know about that. Like,
Yeah, it's it's like a sense of authority in a metaphysical space is how you get to be a cult. You know what I mean? Like it's a
uh-huh.
real slippery slope. I think that it's a really important time, especially right now with all the things that we are going to talk about in this particular transit. It's really important to just have a sense of humility and curiosity and just kind of coming to the table with what you know and being open-minded as well as discerning. And if anybody tries to have a little authority over you, again, it's Aries Emperor energy. Like you're not my dad. You know what I mean?
It's what to do.
Exactly. And that is like the the medicine and the pain of it all, isn't it? Because that is not being a uh a victim of just an authority figure bowling you over is a really important thing. We have to have agency. We have to make sure that we are embodying our own personal power and not just letting someone tell us what our life is or is not. But we also, can't just run amok and be an arrogant asshole and
Yeah.
steamroll over people, you
Yes.
know?
Yes,
There's a
it's
balance.
there is a balance. I was trying to find that balance. Well, I guess starting, we should probably start just a little bit. I know we did this 3 years ago, but just a little bit about what Chiron is, what it might be, what it seems to be as of now, or the ways that it can function, and also Aries energy and kind of how these, I think this is good. So, what would you say about Chiron?
Oh man, okay. I will try and keep this as succinct as possible. I have so many lectures about this that I have made like hours and hours of slides on, so I can talk about this for forever. But Chiron is known pretty like in pop astrology pretty widely as like the wounded healer, right? And I think that particular verbiage lends itself a little bit to this puritanical like cleanliness thing we've got going on, especially in the West, where like anything that is diseased has to be expunged, right? And that really limits how we can view this particular comet and how we can utilize it in astrology. It is a comet, so I like to start off with the astronomy of it all. Um, it's not in the asteroid belt. It is a comet that goes between Jupiter, the outside of Jupiter's orbit, all the way out to just outside of Uranus's orbit. So that's a pretty big span. It's a big stretch of uh, space, truly. And if we think about how those planets, Jupiter's technically more of an inner planet, right? Everything before Saturn is like we can feel it in our immediate reality, and everything past Saturn is more esoteric, more of the mystical divinity, cannot be contained in a corporal form. And so this is really one of the only planetary bodies that spans both of those realms, right? So we're bringing in new sets of consciousness throughout various generations. And it's also important to me personally to mention that it has an elliptical orbit. So it does not spend an equal amount of time in every sign. And in Aries and in Pisces, it spends the most time, up to 10 years. So that is a ton of information and it's a ton of like thematic elements about some of the two most important zodiac signs thematically of something like this when we're talking about like global evolution of the self and the everything. So it's not something that can be super contained, which is why it's so fun to have a long-term study of it, in my opinion. So for like personal planets, if your natal chart, wherever your personal Chiron is, it's emblematic of, in my opinion, really what you are reflecting out to the current state of your family, your society, whatever, that's being rejected. It's like we don't want to see this part of ourselves. But when you're a kid, when you're growing up, you're repeating everything. You're taking in everything that's around you and you're not being discriminating about it. You don't know what the politics of things are. So you reflect it back. And that's the very first part of how we learn what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. But the fact of the matter is, everything is a part of us. So there's this piece that we're taught to be ashamed of in some way, to hide or to, just like not talk about. And that can manifest in some really difficult ways for some of us and some really liberating ways once we know how to work with it. But it's a very lifelong process. It is the key, if you will, that opens the door of Saturn's lock through the labyrinth of our lives. That's how I like to say it. So
That's a lovely way.
thank you. Um, does that answer your question? Sometimes I just go in with.
I think it's good. I think that was good.
Yeah, I would really love to know how you kind of interpret Chiron too, because I love talking to other astrologers and seeing what you guys have to say too.
Well, it's definitely a pain point.
Hmm.
And while I do think that there can be healing there, I don't think that's necessarily the point. Like, we all have things that are painful. And I don't know that the point of Chiron is necessarily to be healed. All of the, it just kind of is. And it's something that we work on, work through, try to work through in the pursuit of that, um, all of our lives.
Yeah, that's a really good point. No, it's that's very true. I think we are so fascinated by trauma because our mental health acceptability and accessibility, especially in the United States, is just so fucked that it's very sexy to be like, ooh, this is like the most deepest trauma of all. Like you look at someone's chart and you're like, oh fuck, your Chiron is just you had an awful time here. And it's like, yeah, I mean, you can say that and really upset someone, but what good is that gonna do? That's not very nice. It's not
Yeah,
very ethical. So
it's not, and that is that is something I know when I read for people because I will see things in people's charts. I'm like, I would love to touch on this, but I always like to ask, do
mhm,
you want to do this, or would you like me to fuck off and we could talk about something else? Because I could, I'm fine with you telling me to fuck off. Like I don't want to talk about that. Fine, okay, you know.
yeah, it's a whole journey. Like it's not something that you can be, nobody can do that kind of work for you. And, when you think about healing, if you break your leg, right, you're never going to forget that you broke your leg. There's always going to be some like weather condition or movement that you twist the wrong way for the rest of your life that you are going to be reminded that you broke your leg. So
Never.
it's kind of about how much does that interrupt your daily function? Like how some people's wounds are really intense and they have to be excavated their entire lives. And it takes a lot of bravery and resilience. And some people really don't, they just completely decide to avoid anything to do with that thing. Um, and that's something that I don't see talked about too much when it comes to Chiron is that it is the area that we are most scared of because it's so painful in our lives. That's where we're most likely to be exploited. That's what I've sort of started to see, especially when we talk about things larger than a single individual, like an entire country. And we can really see that when we look at the United States, both like our main pain points and the things that if we were interested in kind of overcoming some of these weaknesses and ability to be exploited, we could really move forward and embody the types of identities that we are pretending like we embody right now. Does that make sense?
It does make you touch on so okay. Before we go into the US stuff, because I do want to touch on that
Sure.
next. Let's talk just a little bit
Mhm.
about Aries.
Yes.
What do you when you think of Aries, what keywords come to mind? Or what comes to mind? This could even be like fucking songs or whatever comes to you. What comes to mind when you think Aries?
Um, Babies, first of all, screaming babies. We come into this world and we are pissed about it. We are screaming at the top of our lungs. We have no idea what's going on. Um, there's a really lovely, like childlike innocence. There's a playfulness that I see. There's an interest in adventure and bravery because everything is new, right? When you're in a new environment as a kid and you're really excited because there's so much stuff to touch and like run
Mm.
around and it's the first time you're experiencing so much of life. And that's I feel like because we have such a weird like masculine identity in America specifically about like, it's war and it's, fucking sex and it's Mars and it's like, bro, like do a keg stand. It's like, well, you
Ex-
know, how how many of like our billionaires and people in power right now just look like enormous babies having temper tantrums because that's kind of what I see,
like
you
all
know? Yeah, I mean, and how many of them are fucking bald? Like, not to be too literal, but there's so many fun, like, almost tongue-in-cheek things that are visual indicators of this kind of a theme. That's just kind of like, oh my God.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. There's a lot of talk about like healing our inner child and especially in like a historical context, like how we treat children comes up a lot when Chiron is in Aries, how we put them to work, how we either allow for them to have a childhood or take it away from them. I mean, in the 20s, we had like the Great Depression, a lot of child labor, little kids were in factories. That wasn't a fun time for them, you know? Maybe
Absolutely.
that's why they became mean parents. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's almost like a cycle.
Yeah. We're seeing it play out, or we saw it play out. Yes. Yes.
Hmm. And now I think the thing that I, especially just coming from a background of film and television, like entertainment, watching social media evolve has been really fascinating, and almost a little heartbreaking, if I'm being honest, because of how many really young people who probably aren't even like legally allowed to work in their state yet, um, are doing full-on commercials for companies because they're sending them products, and like they don't know how much work is actually supposed to go into something like that because they're having fun. And that's really where like the exploitation comes in, because these companies used to spend, $250,000 on a commercial and have, 20 to 50 people get employed because that's their job, and it's, multiple days in order to make something that now, just some excited kid who's getting attention from a grown up and like some free shit is like excitedly talking about a product. It's just they don't really know their rights, and it feels so special that they don't feel like they can ruin it by trying to ask for any kind of protection or privilege. You know, I'm
Yeah.
very passionate about children's working rights.
No, no, I understand that, but it's like, and I mean, I'm thinking about like all the stuff with like the issue with children working. That has been just in a whole different in different ways. I don't know. That probably
Hmm.
we've gone to a whole other tangent what I'm about to. So I'll stop. But yes, absolutely, the exploitation of children is awful. And you bring up a
Yeah.
with 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 Chiron and exploitation, that there is something there about that too. Just in general, that being where that can happen in the chart and how by sign.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you want to take a look at, your own personal chart to sort of overlay this theme, and really take a minute to be a little bit sad if you want to be like, I think that I have been exploited in these particular areas. And I think a lot of connections can be made, because what happens when we realize we've been exploited, right? We double down and we get really defensive and we're like, fuck that, that's never happening again. And we overcorrect. And so we maybe block out experiences or opportunities that aren't as exploitive, from coming in, because we've had such a terrible experience in the past. And that's kind of where that like wound and healing come to play, because you can't just completely get rid of a sense of yourself. You can't get rid of the fact that you have childlike delight reactions to certain things. And you also need to protect yourself when someone sees that and goes, ah, dollar signs. I can make you do things if you aren't careful, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Very nefarious. But I also think, I mean, as an herbalist, I also think of like the medicinal, medical astrology aspect of it. And it's very much, as a part of the body. It's just the top of your head to like right at your, the top of your teeth, your cheekbones, that kind of area. So your jaw starts with Taurus, but that including the vast majority of your sense of self. It's your hair, your eyes, your skin color, your, entire complexion, your bone structure, and then of course, your nose and your brain. Like the brain looking at itself in the mirror, a reflection back of it. It's an insanely complex and lifelong exploration of the self, just in a physiological sense. So, you know,
And
there's a lot there.
I'd like to shout out something real quick. You are an amazing herbalist.
Thank you.
Absolutely amazing. I just want to say that I use your elastic heart every single fucking night.
Oh,
Probably
thank you.
it's for you have on there. I don't know if it's still on there or not, but it's like the for people whose hearts have been stretched too far. Yeah.
Hmm.
Also feels like an appropriate thing to bring up. in a Chiron conversation, I guess, kind of.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Yeah, astrology informs a lot of the things that I've made in the last 5 years in terms of fancy monster vision and the things I offer because I was looking at this and I was like, ooh, shit, I could just be someone who says all of these terrible things are about to happen, but there's a lot of people already doing that and nobody's really coming with any kind of solutions or like offering of support or even like care. Um, and so I wanted to at least have something. I'm really happy it works for you. I use Elastic Heart every damn day. Definitely on inauguration day, I was like,
yeah. Yeah, that stuff is amazing. And I think I've told you this before. I'm not really somebody who like I don't always feel things like even with crystals, like I love crystals, but there's only like a select few that I really feel things from when I hold them. Lapis is one of them. But that stuff, I feel it. Like I put it on my third eye, I put it at my temples, I put it here between my boobs. I put it on my lips. I do it every night before I go to bed, and it just feels good. So
oh, that makes me happy.
your shit out for sure. I will
Yeah.
can do that. Um, sorry, I kind of deviated there, got off topic a little bit.
I'll always break for an ad for my stuff. Thank you. But actually, you reminded me of something that I know we wanted to talk about, especially Aries is your adrenal glands. It is the like hormonal reactive part of us that, again, it's very childlike and it's very easy to manipulate. Um,
Yeah.
but when we are in a state of like anxiety and panic and reactivity and like fear, like that's very much um inside the realm of Aries in this particular context when it's being activated and triggered. And it's not something that I think we're not super proud of it. Like we all get reactive sometimes. We like get to 11 and we're like, fuck, and we snap. Or like, how many times have you written out a long essay comment telling someone to go fuck themselves on the internet? Like some of us hit send and then like spend hours going back and forth. And sometimes we delete it and go, wow, glad I got that out of my system.
And you're
You
like,
know?
like, wow, that was really something. You spent a long time
Yeah.
doing that.
Yeah, and that's of course like when someone responds like that to something that you're super passionate about and you like were at a reactive state and you have all of these examples, not that I'm a Virgo or anything, and they come up back with like, okay, explosions. So it's very much that anger, that reactivity, and how we can use that to our advantage when we need to, because it's not something that we should be ashamed of. You should be able to have anger and express it appropriately. But it takes work, you know.
You know, yeah, the reactivity. Like my chart ruler is an Aries.
Hmm.
So that is something that I'm much better about it now. But I when I was younger, I used to just kind of get I would I would take bait.
Hmm.
Take the bait. And
It feels good.
it yes, you're feeding into that primal like, you know,
Hmm.
and
Oh yeah.
and then I think I kind of mellowed out a little bit when I had my child because then he got to be the more reactive one. And I'm sitting back like, what's your problem? know? So I think it did
Yeah.
mellow a little bit. But even to this day, there are some things where my reaction is to just you know,
Hmm.
and then I have to go and sit in a closet or go like, okay, like, bitch, you need to calm down. Like, this is, whatever. And it's not about everything, but I can't think of certain things. So but it's like when you do that, even though it feels good, when you take that bait, you are perhaps giving the other person what they want, giving them power, giving them,
Hmm.
and that's kind of what flipped a switch for me. Like, oh, they want you to do that. Don't give them what the fuck they want. Like,
You're not my dad. Literally though.
Yeah.
Like that's a perfect example of like how you can notice something that is maybe not as flattering of a tendency to do that we all do, and to realize that you can spin it and use that same vehemence to reject like acting in a way that is not um, reflective of the person that you are, how you want to move in the world. Like that same spitefulness. I'm not going to give you my energy. I'm not going to give you what you want, which is to see me vulnerable and angry and lashing out at you, because that's not what we're doing here. And
Yeah.
that's kind of, it's the other side of the circle of that. And I mean, I think Aries gets a really bad rap because of all of these things. I mean, we're talking specifically about more of a Chiron focus. I'm leaning in a little bit to those themes, but Aries energy is fantastic. I mean, it's the first cardinal sign. It's giving birth to brand new things. It's your new ideas. It's that eureka moment, when you sit up in the middle of the night because you had a dream and you're like, holy shit, I should move to Maine and start like farming lobsters or whatever the fuck. Like
Well, maybe
there's
not carbon loss.
invention. Exactly.
That sounds awesome.
Like just there's so much good that Aries energy can really get out of us, because we have to be buttoned up, and it's our most primal, it's our most uh feral sometimes and most expressive. And I think that there's something really beautiful about that, and not just in a way that's like useful. Like you can make money if you harness your Aries energy. Blah, 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 like fuck off. You know what I mean? You can just enjoy the fact that like when you find a field of dandelions in the spring, you take a second and you're like, oh my God, I personally like to kick them because I think it's fun watching them explode and having the seeds go everywhere. It's delightful. That doesn't hurt anybody. I'm actually helping the environment. So, it's sweet. There's
Yeah,
sweet little moments that you can have there.
absolutely. So the themes, okay, just quickly, themes that we have seen, we might still expect to see with Chiron and Aries, whereas Chiron has been in Aries.
Oh man. It's a lot of us versus them. It's a
Oh,
lot of Yeah, it's a lot of like, do you look, again, the face, the hair, like, do you look like me? Are you someone who is safe? Are you part of my like team? Um, and it is fundamentally a distraction from the larger amount of power we have collectively of how can we be as divisive as possible to as many people as possible. And if we keep them angry and reactive, then, we can do whatever we want, because they're not going to have any energy left over to do anything about it. They're not going to be in their right mind.
so should
Um,
we so should not. We should all take a moment in a closet or in a bathroom or to be like, this is we don't need to be giving them this.
exactly. Truly. And it's like it's specifically about the expectation of perfection. I think a lot of the themes, especially from one of the first iterations of the Chiron Return in the United States before we knew about it, was very much not letting kids have their childhood, not letting them be kids. They had to take care of their family, they had to go to work, they weren't allowed to play, they weren't allowed to make mistakes. They were smoking and drinking and all sorts of shit. And that's not um that's not really a good place to grow into an adult from. Like you need to be able to make mistakes. You need to be able to not be scared, like that, again, that fear, that installing fear um, in you, that panic, like, oh, I shouldn't even attempt this thing because if I fail, I know what that looks like. And that's very scary. And we're cruel to each other on the internet when people are saying something, they misspeak, if they mispronounce a word, even, we can become vicious online.
Yeah, and people
Um,
big old fucking balls when they're behind a keyboard, be a nasty little fuck.
mhm.
No, they wouldn't be like that. Serious, it wouldn't be like that in person. They're just
Some people, I'm starting to see that a little bit more in person, especially after the COVID lockdowns. I feel like we did the separation, the isolation from one another for so long in the United States. I'm speaking specifically about that, where we sort of lost how to be with other people, how to be a them or an us, like in a group that wasn't so exclusionary that it left you completely alone. I think tolerating one another is a really big thing that we're going to have to learn, because if the lower our tolerance, the more like we split hairs about whether or not someone is exactly aligned with our belief systems. That's a waste of time, and it's not getting the thing you want to get done, right?
And what you bring up, that us versus them and like what you're talking about here is also very Uranus and Gemini, which will be coming.
Hmm.
There will be some overlap between like that and the Chiron return in the US. Like there's just yeah, we people, we got to get our shit together and knock that shit out. Like I
Yeah.
don't know how to say it any nicer than that.
I mean, and that's the beauty of it, is like you don't have to say it nicer, because sometimes and I've noticed this too, because I've worked with kids plenty of time. I've worked with adult men, let's be honest. Like sometimes you ask nicely, you lay out, exactly the steps on how to succeed, and you do not get a response or any kind of change of behavior until you are aggressive and you match that like stubbornness and that anger almost. If we're so conditioned to respond to fear and panic and anger, then we're going to have to learn how to communicate in that way as we like lower the volume and replace it with something that actually works. It's not going to be a switch flip. It's not going to be something that happens overnight. And a lot of us are going to fuck up a lot.
Yeah. Yes, we are. And we have to not be afraid to either. Cuz yeah.
Hmm.
Like the fear thing with Aries. Fear is something that I don't, it doesn't always come up with Aries. The notion of being afraid, right? We think of it as
Hmm.
fearless, and it certainly can be, even to its detriment at times. But there is also
Hmm.
a fear thing with Aries, as Aries energy can also come through as fearful too. Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
But
Because when we are afraid, we are more likely to be aggressive and protect ourselves and one another. Um, and that's really something that our, social media overlords have decided is really what they want to keep us on our toes about. Everything is someone like zooming into the frame and like screaming at you about this thing that you didn't know about, and why don't you know about this thing, and you're wrong about this thing you like, and all of the shit. And it's like it's exhausting. You can't even do the thing on social media that it was designed to do, which is to talk to your friends and like see cute pictures of cats. You know, it's become this like weird propaganda machine, and it's really been taken over. And the thing that I really, really love and appreciate about Aries energy, and it's so just delicious when I get to see some of the high points of it, um, was the very You're Not My Dad about the whole Mark Zuckerberg thing, and how many people decided when the TikTok ban was coming, we're not going to Facebook and Meta. We're not going to Instagram. We're going over to Red Note. We're going to hang out with our Chinese friends. People would rather learn Mandarin in spite, like out of spite, because fuck you, American government. We're so unhappy. They would rather learn Mandarin and talk to people that they've been told their whole lives are the enemy than to give in to Mark Zuckerberg and his weird, creepy little metaverse. You know what I mean? And that development was such like it was maybe one of the first times I actually had like a legitimate like feeling of hope, because when I went over on Red Note, they were so sweet. Everybody from China and all over the world was like, America, come over here. Yes, ask whatever you want. We want to get to know you. Like they were so sweet. They were like, we had no idea that little kids in America used to try and dig a hole to China because they wanted to come see us. And like I remember doing that. Do you remember doing that when you were a kid? You're like, can I get to China? Like, I don't know. And they when they were children and they were learning English in their schools, they have like a letter writing program, like write a letter to your American friend, Liwa. And it's just so that they can get used to conversational English. But it was a really beautiful like meeting of two generations that have been trying to talk to each other for so long, and there's been a huge divide that they didn't sign up for. And so that spitefulness, that like you're not my dad shit, can really be used for good. And people are, I'm excited to see what comes of it because if we can let go as a country of needing to be number one and needing to be like the best at everything and actually like hear what other countries have to say about us and what they've learned about us, um, and take that under consideration, we can learn a lot from how much longer histories and countries and governments have been able to learn. And we can implement that in real time. That's something amazing about Uranus and Gemini coming back. A lot of times we talk about it being like the Civil War and like all of this scary stuff, but it's also technology and communicating, you
It is.
know?
And
I'm sure you've touched on that too.
oh yeah,
But
for sure. But no, no, I mean, and even, the coming together or the meeting with people from other it kind of helps to break down a little bit of that us versus them thing,
mhm.
which I think is desperately what we need. We need that.
Yeah, it's not as much. I mean, there's like a sense of ownership. Um, and of course, like when you think of a small child, they are defenseless. And the whole point is to make sure that they don't die the first, like, for a few years of their lives. They're like always trying to commit suicide, like you were
Yeah,
mentioning before. As a mom, you have experience.
yeah, I remember when, especially when, yeah, when my son was like 2, 3 years old, I was thinking, fuck, I'm like constantly keeping him from fucking committing suicide. That's what this is. Sticking things in
Hmm.
outlets to eat, and it's like, no, you're gonna die. Stop. Like,
Exactly. So there's like a healthy balance of like needing to experience things that cause you pain. Like, oh, I know not to do that anymore. Knives are sharp. Cool. They don't go in me, you know? So that's going to be a great thumbnail for YouTube, just me. Um, But like, there's a generation or two of like hovering helicopter parents who don't want their kids to experience any pain ever. And that has some serious drawbacks as well. And if you zoom out from an individual uh, perspective to a governmental perspective, that's really what the United States has been doing. We have been feeding this fantasy to ourselves and to the world for so long about how we're independent and we're strong, we don't need
yeah,
anyone, and we're the best, blah, blah, blah. And, a lot of other countries believed it because they didn't question it. And a lot of them were like, I think you're kind of full of shit, but all right. But we're very isolated, just like geographically from the rest of the world. So it's easier for us to be that insular and to like get that propaganda wheel going. So, yeah.
yeah, it is. Yeah, and that what you just said about, us, kind of like we're kind of full of shit. That is, with the US's Chiron and Aries in the fourth house of the US's chart, there is definitely wounding about this sense of.
Hmm.
Do you want to look at that real quick? The chart
Sure. Yeah.
I have,
We have so many.
I do, but um, let me make sure I'm not looking at something stupid at the. Okay, good, because I never know when I do that. Okay, cool. I'm on the right thing. Okay. Okay. So the US's
Hmm.
chart is on the inside. Transits for February 18th of 2025. That is, oh, before we do this, maybe okay, so the US's Chiron return, just to give some dates real quick. Um,
Hmm.
essentially, keep in mind, Chiron goes retrograde and direct and back and forth. So all in all, though, from May of 2022 through March of 2026, with some breaks.
Hmm.
Um, exact dates 421 of 24, 421, right? Not 420. Yeah, 421.
Yes.
421.
21. Yeah, we would have made a joke if it was 420.
Yeah, I feel like 420. Uh, yeah, 420. Yeah, 421 of 24. November 8th of 24. And
Hmm.
then coming up here in the next couple weeks on February 18th of 25.
Hmm. Yeah. And I did a little bit of research. The 21st was not one of those super intense days in 2024, as far as like headlines go, but it was when we started to really become aware of like the TikTok ban, and they were passing those kinds of motions to set it in place of like, you're not going to have this ability to communicate with one another in this way for very long. And again, it's a kids app. It's for communicating and dancing and, having fun. And they're like, this is a threat to national security. We simply cannot.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
then
Go ahead.
the other one on election
Hmm. Yeah. 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 Nothing particularly interesting happened that day. So, maybe that one was a wash, November 8th of 2024. Fine. We're fine. But that was the retrograde conjunction. And something interesting also is that just this particular year is so fascinating. I love to see it. Because of how many ingresses there are in 2025.
I
But
know it's
also,
crazy.
I know it's like it's really interesting for so many reasons, but like the Chiron return of the United States, typically, because it's at 20 degrees, it's very much on the road that, larger paths go across multiple times. So usually we have for this country multiple direct and retrograde returns. It'll like reach 20, pass it, go back over, and then turn direct. And sometimes it'll come back again, but it usually hits about four-ish times. This year, this particular one, it's only going to be these three dates. So it's April 21st, 2024, November 8th, 2024, and then February 18th. So that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, there
I
are.
don't know.
Yes.
It's going to be bigger and louder because there's not going to be as many like chances for this to really bring home the message.
Yes. So it's going to do it really loud, really clear.
Hmm.
Um, in the previous Chiron returns that we've had, and there was one in the 1820s, there was one in the 1870s. I'll be honest, I haven't done that much historical research about those particular ones, but
Hmm.
obviously during, 1820s and the 1870s, there was, the US and natives,
Hmm.
all of
The
that.
indigenous population. Yep.
Yeah, and there, I mean, even like here in Texas, there were actually, I think, some major battles that took place in the 1870s. Uh,
Hmm. Oh yeah.
so
Yeah. Go ahead.
oh no, go on, go on.
Um, I've done like I have a whole like section about like the United States specifically having cycles with both Saturn and Chiron. 'Cause if you look in the inner circle, they're at a pretty decent opposition. It's a little bit wide, but it is between Saturn in Libra and Chiron in Aries. And so we can see in legislation every 20 or 30 years after a return, a rolling back of certain rights for certain demographics or, implementations of that. Like the ICWA, the Indian Child Welfare Act, was passed, I believe, in 2021, which is when you have children being put up for adoption, they are prioritized to stay within their tribe and not given to a larger system where like white people can
Yeah,
just scoop them up because that's really not what's best for them. But we also saw, a lot of the unearthing of mass graves from the schools, the assimilation schools for Indigenous people, not just in the United States, but also in Canada. And I believe, I want to say that it was outlawed during our very last Chiron return in the 60s and the 70s. I want to say it was in the mid 70s. I don't have the exact date because I'm an unprofessional bitch. But we can see like that theme keeps coming up. Our native populations um, are kind of on deck, as well as a lot of other racial issues. I mean, the civil rights movement pretty famously continued throughout the 70s. And now we're seeing what this administration just this week is throwing around the words DEI as if that means anything but something racist. We do
absolutely.
the two steps forward, one steps back a lot. Um, but yeah. And not for nothing, but the in 2021, for example, the Crown Act was passed, which disallows discrimination against hiring someone or in schools based on how you wear your hair. And that is very specifically targeted toward African Americans and people of color who need protective hairstyles. I can't remember how many different news articles I heard about growing up where like some poor kid having dreadlocks or braids like had atrocious shit happen to them just because they were at school. Like you're not allowed to be on the football team if you don't cut your hair. I remember watching videos of people having their hair cut in school.
Uh-huh.
Um, because like that is an atrocious human rights violation, and it's happening to children, and it's of course happening to a very specific cultural identity marker, which is our hair. And we did the same thing to Indigenous children. We shaved their heads, we cut their hair off, we made sure that they looked as white as possible, as Aryan as possible. Um, so there are very, very obvious physical markers when we see these themes as well that I don't think should be taken super lightly, but as a benchmark of, oh, yes, this sure is what I think it is, you know?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we just keep, like you said, we take a step forward, take two steps back, kind of.
Yeah.
And it's like, when are,
But again, go ahead.
no, that's all. Just when are we gonna fucking learn?
Well, hopefully, I mean, that's kind of what these Chironic cycles are giving, at least as checkpoints and benchmarks. We now can speak to each other more than ever. We now know from personal experience, if you want to put in the effort to learn about people who don't look like you can do that very easily. People are very interested in sharing their experiences and accepting your help and your, time and your power and your privilege if you are so interested in giving them more power that they've been, deprived of in this country. Um, but even like the physical markers, like going on a little bit of a lighter note, I mean, can you get more obvious than a fucking red hat with like Helvetica text on it or whatever that says "Make America Great Again"? Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Um,
Uh-huh.
you know, be a little more creative. But
I'd like to point something out since you brought, we don't even need to say their names,
sure.
but, another, thing about Chiron and Aries and the returns are the last two ones that we've had. We either saw a president die or we saw a
Mm-hmm.
president expelled essentially from office.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And that didn't always like turn out the best. It's not like we had some sort of fantastic time immediately after that. But I think you brought that up the other day, and I had never looked into that. And I think that's fascinating. I've heard plenty of astrologers say something of that sort might be the case. I think all of us were hoping it was going to happen before January, but it didn't. So that's fine.
yeah,
Um,
but it is. I mean, I was obviously, I went further back into history, right? The other Chiron returns, and nothing happened.
mhm,
But I do think it's interesting. Harding in what year? What the fuck year was it? 1923 had a heart attack, and
mhm.
then was Nixon resigned in
Yep.
74. So I mean, I do think that that's, I don't know, an interesting theme. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, when was Saturn was in Aries in 96, 97, I think. I feel like Clinton's impeachment trials were a little bit before that, but again, you can see like the push-pull of the legislation of when things like that work and when they really don't, but they're making a show of it. But you can really see in what's happening right now, again, the themes of being an indignant asshole child, right? Of just like doing whatever you want, saying whatever you want, having so much power that you just decide to act like a child. And the very real ramifications of what that can be like for people who are exposed to your behavior. Um, but it's important, in my opinion, to remember that we each have that power inside of us. We all have that spiteful, you're not my dad vibe. We can kill someone's fame by memeing them to death on the internet, should we want to. Like, there's plenty of ways that we can have collective action that look very different than I think what we're expecting out of like an old school revolution. But it's going to take lots of tiny little actions like that to take away power from people who are acting like fucking children.
Absolutely.
That's my little that's my little piece of advice. Get your petty on, everyone. Seriously, use it for good.
I use it for the no, yeah, because I mean, if it can feel good to do that anyway. So, but using it in a higher vibrational way or to a good cause or
Practical. I'm a practical Virgo. Why don't you get some results? If you're gonna be petty, like you should get, you know, get a gift bag for it, you know? Um, I really would love to know if you have, if looking at this chart of the final Chiron return, because this is in its exactitude, we feel it much, much longer than this. But considering that the retrograde exactitude was on election night, I'm really interested to see if you see anything in this chart that sticks out to you about this. If not,
um,
that's fine.
you mentioned the thing about the south node, and north node just moved into Virgo and south node Virgo, north node Pisces. And there's
Hmm.
something about the purist. You were mentioning earlier about the purist thing, and Virgo energy can function that the cleanliness, the honestly, I'm not even sure what the hell I'm trying.
That's okay. It's this big topic. I try to stay away from like very specific predictions, especially about something like this, because we are all very much at a 10. We're all very much in a panicky, like, oh my God, something needs to change. Is it going to ruin my life? Fuck. Like, we're all very scared in this country about what's going to happen. So I think, and I've seen in the past, especially with the election and with like other world events, where astrologers kind of take that and again exploit it a little bit and say, oh, this is what's going to happen. And people give their power away to that and just hope that that's the case. But there's really no way to know. We've never seen this before. There's certain things that I can think about and say, this might be interesting to look out for. But if you keep your eye on like the themes of it all, if you're just thinking about the physiological aspect of it, and noticing that, or noticing like the rage bait stuff or the
God,
identity politics, that kind of stuff,
the rage, but
you'll notice a lot.
that is definitely a thing. Not even just with the U.S., but with Chiron and Aries in general, right? Not looking at the chart, I also noticed Mars is still retrograde. This just feels pissy.
Hmm.
This feels pissy. I mean, I'll be honest, Mars and Cancer feels a little pissy to me anyway. But if,
Yeah.
but as the ruler of this, of Chiron and Aries, I don't. They're just and squaring it. They're this
Hmm.
feels a little like a like a pissy temper tantrum. I think I almost said
Yeah.
tantrum, which doesn't even make sense. Stupid.
I mean, it could make sense. I see the vision, what you're going for here. I think it's I think it's particularly interesting that we have a little bit of an out of sign portal from the sun transiting to the moon, our natal moon, in 27 degrees of Aquarius. The sun will just have gotten into Pisces when this happens. And I really see that as sort of illuminating some like the man behind the curtain situation. You know what I mean? Like, it's very scary to see stupid people have so much power because they're unpredictable and it's they don't care. They don't have any thoughtfulness about their actions. But I think um, it might be a little bit more revelatory about just how much they have no idea what they're doing. And if we can, if certain people who are preparing for these next few years, have their wits about them, there are definitely periods of time when they can take advantage of, the fantasy kind of dissolving for a minute. So,
Yes, absolutely.
mhm.
We are, I know that you would also I know that you mentioned that you don't feel quite as pressured to go into everything, right? Because you,
Yeah, it would take hours and hours. I could just, but like I'm not. It's all right.
I
We have
probably,
so much.
I probably could too. Um,
Yeah.
um, the AI stuff though, you had mentioned
Mhm.
wanting to, so I think before we head out, because this has almost gotten to be an hour, I think at this point, close to
Okay.
it.
Yeah.
Um,
Almost.
um, the AI stuff and even the psychological and mental health stuff, touching on both of those things with Chiron. I'm gonna take the chart off of here. So we'll go back to us.
Sure.
But just with Chiron and Aries in general, and even within the US's Chiron return, kind of
Hmm.
I mean, we're definitely seeing AI stuff going on right now.
Yeah, I think the when we think about AI, like the stories that we've been told about like robots, right? It's always about robots learning how to feel, and whether or not that's something. It's a very like Pygmalion situation. Um, but with technology right now, we are at a point of advancement where we're sort of trying to externalize our brain so it can really experience itself at itself, um, which can be terrifying for some people, right? That's not something your brain was ever prepared to do. That will really fuck you up if you haven't ever had an existential crisis before. That's not a really good one to start with. I'll tell you that much. But we have a lot of like fear and propaganda about AI and about the fact that it has environmental issues. Um, and it's, stealing ideas from artists. As someone who's affected by that, I feel it, I get it. But it is at the end of the day a tool. And I think that the fear about those kinds of technological advancements are there to essentially keep us disempowered. And that was something that I thought was also very funny in the past couple of weeks that China's AI model, their chatbot model, their language model, which is I think is going to be particularly interesting when we have the Uranus and Gemini transit coming up, what that will look like for language models and such. Um, they don't have those issues. They don't have their AI stealing intellectual property. Again, into like all of your ideas, all of your creativity, all your self-expression is being fed into these machines. In the United States, we have those servers in places where they are taking water from the communities around them, and really doing some evil shit. Um, but Chinese servers don't do that. They purposefully put those types of server like complexes, I don't even know what you call them, in naturally cold areas where water is very plentiful. And they like they're not stupid. They're not like evil is not an inherent attribute of artificial intelligence or of technological advancements. But we have like this whole Terminator narrative that we just like have to fight the robots and like all this shit. But it's not like a self-evident trait. And I think again, if we can get over the themes, the things that we have ascribed to ourselves as Americans or as something like, an AI, if we can take those stories that we've been told and like have really kept to our hearts, the things that we thought were keeping us safe, and learn that there are other ways of doing things and it doesn't have to be that way, we could absolutely utilize tools like AI without harming people. It could absolutely make us able to have easier lives where we don't have to do backbreaking labor. Robots can go pick crops. They don't have to make paintings.
Yeah, see that
That's weird.
when I think about robots, like because like there's a I've had clients that have come and they've gotten reports from somebody
Hmm.
their reports are either completely from software or they are AI done, and you we can start
Hmm.
up
You
the
can
label.
tell.
Yeah, yeah, we do. And so when they'll be like, "Are the reports you do AI?" No, none of them are. I mean, it's all me sitting at, sitting at, it,
Oh yeah.
if I, but I'm thinking to myself, if I were to really use robots and shit, I want them folding my fucking towels.
Yeah,
I want
exactly.
them washing my fucking dishes. I want to do the creative shit. Like,
That's literally like that is what the our brain wants to do is express itself. It wants to invent new things, it wants to solve problems. But like we have so many daily tasks, the mundane bullshit that we have more than enough ability to solve so that we can spend our time focusing on other things. But instead, we and I say like the royal we, as in like our government, is using it as a tool of oppression and profit and greed because it's easier to control people when they're panicked and hungry and exhausted and like folding their fucking laundry instead of sitting in front of a canvas going, huh,
what could this
well, I'll
be?
be damned.
Yeah.
Yeah, like there's lots of realizations that happen when you're creating art, and it can be bad art. It doesn't have to be like some fantastic thing that is again for greed and profit. It's a whole thing. But the very real fear of being replaced by robots and like again it's an us versus them thing of like humanity versus technology like they're not sentient, they're not people. They might trick you into thinking that they're people because you're tired, but like there is a physiological response we have to things that look very human but aren't. I mean, the uncanny valley is something that artists and science has tried to get as close to actual realism as possible, but you cannot get there because there is a spark of divine consciousness that you cannot input into an inorganic being. We are not gods, you know? So that's a very scary thought also. It like makes you feel very small when you think about like
Yes, it
that
does.
as well. It's a huge circular like Ouroboros of like I want to be in control, but I have no control. Holy fuck, I am a tiny speck. Oh God, I have to be in control because I'm very scared. Like it's very that. Um, but yeah, I could go on for a million years about that. I have lots of feelings. But was that helpful?
That was helpful. That was,
Okay.
and I think I just got a little head popping out the door. So I think we might have to take off.
Hmm.
But I know that you have definitely, I won't share where you can be found because you have stuff on this topic. I know that you've talked about having more on this topic. So where can you be found?
Yes. Well, you can find me on my website if you're interested in my herbalism or if you want to book a session with me, fancymonstervision.com. Um, if you are interested in my thoughts for not having to purchase anything, which I really appreciate, you can go to my Substack. I'm planning on doing lots of little articles about this because it is such a huge topic. And I might in the future have other things to offer, but until I've made them, I won't advertise them. But stay tuned. It'll be fun.
And I will put all of that stuff in the description box where people can find you. And thank you
Hmm.
so much for wanting.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure, as always.
It has been. And I guess to everybody watching this, I'll see you later.
Bye.